Hey family, we're back. My name is Jomo,
I'm Charmaine.
and welcome to our YouTube channel. Today we're going to talk about why they be arguing so much. I don't know about you, but it seems like we have a lot of heated fellowship, disagreement, discord, and I wonder why. Because see, I know that I am a very kind, soft-hearted, generous person. Why would somebody want to argue with me? But I know it's not you, Charmaine. I'm just talking about people I heard that it seems like people like to argue. Today, we're going to dig in.
Right. Why does my spouse like to argue with me so much? Let's get into it.
Let's get into it.
Maybe they're unhappy. Maybe they're so unhappy. And you know that saying, misery loves company?
Yeah.
I think sometimes in a marriage, when your spouse is miserable, and it may not even have anything to do with you, or it may have everything to do with you, when they're unhappy, they want you to be unhappy with them.
You know, I've seen the brother. He will argue just so he can leave the house.
It's a tactic.
It's a strategy. Because if I can argue and really get, be contentious, then it gives me a reason to leave the house. Now, this is not healthy, but I've realized that sometimes people, they start arguments not to really start an argument, but to really not engage.
I also feel like sometimes it could be insecurity, where they may have a low self-esteem, and because of their low self-esteem, they argue all the time to try to deflect from how they're really feeling about themselves.
You know, I think in the world we're in, I don't know if people know this, but the most educated group of people are Black women.
Yes.
Okay. So if you are a brother and you have this strong, educated, powerful boss chick, and for the most part, she may have more education than you. She may have a better job than you, and she may make more money than you. A man may feel insecure about that and try to argue to show supremacy. Argue to show that he's the man. Arguing just because that's the area that he can feel that he can dominate, which is not necessarily healthy. And we as individuals have to be mindful that just because she may have more education or may have a better job. Now, this is not every case, but in today's world, it's becoming a bigger issue for some that the wife or the spouse may have more than the man has. And then it becomes some kind of issue. So that's a real challenge. But then the other issue is, suppose this is my normal. Suppose this is all I ever known. My family be cutting up. And if we not yelling and screaming, well, we not talking. What if I grew up in a home where contention and loud yelling and arguing, when we first met, I wondered why she talked so loud. And see, I'm not saying she's argumentative. I'm just saying she's argumentative. And so, but for me, I said, why is it that she always wants to win? And I knew I was right, but she thought she was right. Meaning, we just came from different places. And I didn't realize that her normal was her natural until I went to her family's home and I sat down at the dinner table and I watched how they communicated. And I said, oh.
Were we arguing?
No, I realized it wasn't me. It was just how her environment was, that they spoke loud, they made jokes, and it was just it was an entertaining table. You know what I mean? And so I just wasn't used to that. And so for me, mine was a little quieter, you know? So the sound I was kind of jarred at first, but then I realized it was normal. And so here's the reality is, what if I grew up and all I saw was arguing?
Right. I had a cousin, her parents argued as a means of communication. And it was really hard because when she became married, that was her normal. Her normal was always having a debate or always start, as my mom would say, starting mess, you know, because that was her normal. And it was really sad because once she got married, it was so evident that she had gotten it from her parents because we knew her parents.
Yeah.
And it was something that her husband had to learn to live with, which is a terrible thing because one thing you don't want to do in a marriage is learn to live with something that you totally dislike about your spouse, but her spouse loves her so much that he kind of shuts down. When she starts just going on a rant about something or debating about something, and we all see it, it's kind of like a mood, a shift in the atmosphere, it's like being out with a couple for dinner.
Jesus.
And they start arguing and it makes everything so uncomfortable. You don't even know what to say. You don't know how to smooth it over. You don't know if you should smooth it over. But it just makes everything so very uncomfortable. And I think if you don't see yourself in that moment, you don't know that you need to change either.
It's amazing in regards to what you said, because I've heard people feel as if they're not arguing, they're not communicating. That if we don't get heated, we didn't get nothing done. And again, it's a lot of poor training, poor environment, to where we don't even realize that you don't have to yell and scream to communicate.
Right.
And oftentimes when people are yelling and screaming, it's because they're not being heard or they're not winning the argument, which is a whole nother situation where they feel as if that, their point is not being made. So therefore, since that's not my point and I'm not winning the point, let's just get loud.
Right. It's in their nature.
Yeah. And so, and some are just, that's their nature. I know, I don't think you're argumentative, Charmaine. I think you want to be heard. Mm-hmm. And when you're not heard, you will be repetitive. But it's not because you want to be repetitive. It's because you don't think I received it.
Right. We've had this conversation before where I feel like when we're communicating, you don't understand what I'm saying. Mm-hmm. So because you don't understand my point of view or you're not agreeing with me,
that's the better word.
That I feel like I have to reword what I'm saying in order for you to understand.
Correct.
And not necessarily dummy it down, because a lot of people are like, oh, let me dummy it down so you can understand. No, Jomo's very smart. So Jomo, I don't need to dummy anything down, but I was thinking maybe I'm not communicating well. I put it on myself. So I was like, I'm not communicating in the best way. So let me reword it to try to get him to understand. And I remember one specific conversation that we had, and you said, Charmaine, it's not that I don't understand what you're saying. You could reword it 5-10 times. I don't agree with you. And that hit me so hard that you said you didn't agree with me. I'm like, but I'm right. How can you not agree with me when I know that I'm right? And I realized at that moment that just because he doesn't agree with me doesn't mean that we can't be equitable in the situation, because it wasn't a big deal. We can have differences of opinion on things and it not be a deal breaker.
It doesn't have to be a war. Dr. Gottman would say that 69% of the things we deal with are perpetual, meaning they're not going away.
Right.
I'm not going to agree with you on this. But just because I don't agree doesn't mean I can't be agreeable.
Right.
Just because you think you're right doesn't mean that we're not trying to do it righteously. Being right is based on your opinion and your interpretation. That's right. Being righteous is God's opinion and God's interpretation. So many times, so many people are trying to be right, but not be righteous. Mm-hmm. We're not trying to win every argument. 1 Corinthians 13 says, love grows in the flowering of truth.
That's good.
It's not about me being right or you being right, but what's righteous in the situation. Another thing I think people argue about is misinterpretation. We don't understand, we don't receive. Listen, we've been together now 30 years. I said 30 years. And up to yesterday, we had a disagreement. Now, it wasn't big, but I said, you know what? New Jomo. So, simple story. We have chickens and we have like a little farm and we're doing homesteading and all that kind of stuff. It's really cool, I think. Anyway, so we were in the process of working to get, a greenhouse taken down. And so I had mentioned to my wife, do you want to go get the truck? And she's like, get the truck. And so I thought it was a simple request, but she had never done it before. So she kind of went off feeling some kind of way. The old me would let her go. The new me, I chased her down. I said, Mama, I'll take you. I'll show you exactly how to do it. Meaning, if I'm not communicating properly, I'm going to reinforce, re-speak, and the whole atmosphere changed when I didn't let her feel that way without me recommunicating. And so oftentimes, a lot of the issues we deal with is misinterpretation. In business, they say the number one issue in most businesses is poor communication. So I have a responsibility to say it right, and she has a responsibility to hear it right.
Right. That can also be as simple as you looking at me a certain way, and then I'm assuming that you have an attitude, or assuming that you're mad about something that maybe we spoke about a few minutes ago, and you're not even thinking about it. It's not even about you at all. But how many times have couples gone by and watched a body language or facial expression and went off of that, and then the other spouse is like, I don't even know why you're upset. And you're like, I know what you're thinking. I know what you're, and they're like, no, I wasn't thinking that at all. But a part of that is not assuming positive intent, and not assuming the worst about our spouse. We can also have a lack of empathy when we are arguing. And I think lack of empathy can be really hard on a marriage, because you always feel like you are buying for their understanding, and you just want to make sure they understand you and feel what you're feeling. And if your spouse is always dumbing down how you feel, or dumbing down a situation that you're very, very passionate about, or something may have happened to you and you're like, oh, it's okay. Oh, they called you that, words, sticks and stones, no big deal. And, or maybe you didn't get the response you needed for a certain situation that's going on in your marriage. Maybe they brushed off something that was important to you. A lack of empathy can cause bitterness, and bitterness can run deep in a marriage, and it can last for a long time if it's not dealt with and resolved.
I think 100% sure in regards to that, because I know that I didn't communicate well until I started seeing it from your lens. And the empathy part, meaning we often see through our lens, but we don't see through the lens of others. Mm-hmm. And when you can start seeing through the lens of others, you can start to have some grace, mercy for the other person's perspective. Mm-hmm. The other challenge people have is passive aggressive. I'm good. No, you're not good. You're not good. But people will say, I'm good. We straight. You all right? Yeah. But you're not. And so people wrestle with a person who's in passive aggressive when they say one thing, but everyone knows they're not good.
Right. When couples are arguing, sometimes the argument isn't even that big a deal. It's not a deal breaker, the argument itself, but one person just has that desire to win.
Because I'm a winner.
You want to win, but in your I guess your plight to win, you lose. Absolutely. Because you wind up shooting below the belt. You say things that you would have never said. You do things that you probably wouldn't have done. You went too far with something because you're caught up in trying to win an argument. instead of really trying to hear your spouse and resolve the situation, somebody said once that the disagreement or the problem isn't that's the problem with the argument. It's not your spouse. Your spouse isn't the enemy in the argument.
Yes.
It's whatever the situation is
Correct.
that you're trying to resolve.
Correct.
So we shouldn't make our spouse the enemy when we're trying to communicate.
Correct.
So sometimes it's really hard not to get in that competitive spirit if you're like an athlete or something that, like if you're a salesperson at your job, you can quickly get into that mode of, I need to win versus I'm not competing with my spouse. I'm trying to complete.
I think I've seen a lot with executives. I've seen a lot with people whose job is to argue. Like lawyers, they have it rough because they're always having a counter or rebut versus just saying, I get it. I understand versus I'm trying to win because, if you are a good communicator, you can win most arguments. Because I've seen a person who couldn't communicate well. They lost the argument, but they were right, but they couldn't articulate it. Another reason people argue a lot is they have trust issues. And man, if you break trust, it's going to be hard. You're going to stay in a constant argument because once that I don't trust you, then everything you say loses credibility because I don't believe you. Well, I'm going down to go hang out with the boys. I don't think so. I think you're lying. And so once trust is gone, credibility is gone, and now we're going to argue about things I really mean, but you don't believe it. And then before you know it, once I realize you don't believe me, now I start to feel some kind of way towards you. And before you know it, you're on the road to, a broken relationship.
Right. I feel like trust is one of those foundational things in your relationship that if trust is broken, it takes time to heal and get back to a good place. And I feel like with trust too, that if your spouse is arguing about trust, there is a trust issue in your relationship because they're not going to constantly be arguing with you on trust issues if they don't have a trust issue. So I would definitely address it. It's definitely a conversation. And maybe it's time, if there is a trust issue, to sit down and go over some things that could help rebuild trust. You don't try to do those things on your own because the things that you may try to do to rebuild trust with them may not be the things that they need in order to rebuild trust with you.
Absolutely. Trust is a bedrock foundation challenge that everyone has to stay on top of. And if you break trust, you need to stop everything. Mm-hmm. Stop everything and have a hard reset.
Right.
If not, you can't build on it.
I feel like this was a great topic again, man. I really feel like this is something that married couples can use in order to strengthen their relationships.
Absolutely.
And I feel like they may know a couple that may need this information. So if you do, please don't forget to share our video. And remember, love,
laugh,
and learn.
Be blessed.